What's going on YouTube? It's Deej back again with another video. Today we're talking about the Minnesota Vikings in our season preview series, and hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, be sure to hit that like button. It really would help me out a ton. If you're new around here, want to see more of this series and football content in general, get really close to regular season, just hit that big red subscribe button. Tell me what you think about the Vikings down below in the comment section. How big of an impact is Kevin O'Connell? What can he get out of Kirk Cousins? How do you think this Justin Jefferson contract situation plays out? Love to have your thoughts on top of, win range, X factors, games to watch. Love to hear anything you have to say about the Vikings, and I respond to just about every comment. So let's talk about Minnesota down below. Before we start talking about the Vikings, one last piece of housekeeping. Apologies, I have not mentioned this before. I've had to pre-record videos because of work, travel, etc., etc. But we have surpassed 1,000 subscribers, and seriously, that was my goal when I first started, and it means the world to me that we've been able to hit it in less than 2 years too, which is a pretty nice turnaround, a nice timetable there. So seriously, thank you everybody who's ever watched, liked, commented, subscribed. Any of that, it really does mean the world to me, and hopefully this is just the beginning. So I'm excited to continue moving forward and, help us continue to grow. Again, hit that big red subscribe button. But seriously, thank you all again. I'm thinking about some giveaway ideas. So once we get, into the season, I'm thinking about some stuff I could be able to do, give away, and get back to y'all. So seriously, thank you all again so much. But with all that aside, let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings. So this, if you're new to this series, welcome to it. I'll kind of break down what I'm talking about with each bullet point. We'll start with win range, my projected win total. And it's kind of tough for the Vikings because win range 8-10 feels like, outside of the one Case Keenum year, pretty much where this team has, found its comfort zone being, in and around 500. Last year, 8-9 record. I think this year they'll probably be up and over that 500 mark, and I wouldn't be surprised, given on the low side variance last year, they could be a 10-7 team. And, once I get my updated record predictions, you may see something like that. But right now I have it at 9-8, and I'll kind of go position group by position group, kind of give you a feel for where I think this roster is at. So Kirk Cousins is, one of the most talked about quarterbacks in the league, which is, funny because, he gets almost as much, rhetoric and airtime as someone like a Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, but not nearly as good. But because he represents such an interesting balance of the quarterback position, is he good enough to warrant, that $40+ million contract that, Lamar is presumably going to get at the time this recording has not, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, down the line, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, those types of guys. But he's not quite as good as those guys. So is he really worth that? But, damn, you could do a whole lot worse than Kirk Cousins. So he was QB 14, if my memory serves, in my QB power rankings. One of the better starting options in the league, of course. But, the price tag is kind of an interesting one. I'm really fascinated to see what Kevin O'Connell does with, Kirk Cousins this year. And I've kind of hit on this a couple times while quickly talking about the Vikings. But Mike Zimmer and then, offensive coordinators Gary Kubiak, he then retired from the NFL and then handed it off to his son Clint. It always felt like when you watch the Vikings, especially on the offensive side, third and long, they would kind of give up drives. They were playing not to lose. You compare that to, what Sean McVay has just always done, whether it was with Goff and especially last year with Stafford, where he led the NFL in interceptions, got a Super Bowl for it, but still led the league in interceptions. And I'm hoping to see that from Kevin O'Connell. That philosophy is much more we play to win. And while those two things sound so similar on paper, playing not to lose and then playing to win, the way you execute those things are completely different. So I'm hoping we see a lot more, passing on early downs, trusting Kirk Cousins, 3rd and 10. I don't want to see a halfback draw. I want to see you trust a guy who you're paying a lot of money to, just gave an extension to this offseason, and you have Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, and a nice motley of other pass catchers to go along. Dalvin Cook can be an impact there. The tight end position will figure itself out. There are weapons to use if you're Kirk Cousins. So I'm hoping, a change in philosophy and a mindset and, being more aggressive on fourth downs. If you're on the other side of the 50 and the opponent's side of the field, go for it. That's the type of stuff I want to see. Maximize Kirk Cousins' value and what he could do for your team, and maximize possessions too, right? So then getting off of Kirk, because I could talk about that all day. Dalvin Cook's fantastic. This team just has, kind of like Pittsburgh with wide receivers, the Vikings with running backs. They just have an eye for that position and continue to have a nice stable of ball carriers even behind Dalvin Cook, so wouldn't expect anything different there. Then the wide receiver, Justin Jefferson's a top 3 receiver. If I'm starting a team right now, he's one of the first 3 guys I'm thinking, maybe 2. It's tough when you weigh in, long term, comparing him and Devontae Adams. But dude's a freak. And you can pair that with Adam Thielen, and these guys just win in different ways. Adam Thielen is possession, route running, savant. And then you have Justin Jefferson, who's also a really good route runner, but dominates at the intermediate and is a big play waiting to happen. So he wins at those middle and then deep tiers. And I like to see wide receivers win at least at 2 of those 3. But if you do it the intermediate and deep down the field, those are chunk plays, so those weigh heavily. And then KJ Osborne, I think, could be, as a wide receiver 3, kind of a nice piece. And Kevin McConnell, you're going to see a lot more, 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers. So he's going to see the field a lot more than what, the Kubiaks and Zimmer regime might have wanted or might have done previously. And then the offensive line, it's just one of these units where it's been aligned for so long, but I feel like it's starting to get there, right? Year 2 of Christian Darrisaw we'll talk about later. Ezra Cleveland's starting to get good buzz, and he feels like a nice piece there at left guard, going into year 3 or 4 out of Boise State. So he's getting towards the end of his, rookie contract. And sometimes those guards and offensive linemen in general takes, 3 or so years for them to really start hitting their stride. Garrett Bradbury is going to be a really interesting case study because he fits so well with that Kubiak offense, but he just did not play that well, specifically in pass protection. Like Kenny Clark, it feels like he gets a guaranteed 3 sacks a year just by seeing the Vikings twice and getting to go one-on-one with Garrett Bradbury. But similar scheme, but maybe a change in the coaching staff, the offensive line, whatever. Maybe with the new regime, he'll be able to take a step forward. You certainly hope so if you're the Vikings. And then, that right guard spot still being battled for. And then, Brian O'Neill, I almost called him Riley Reef. Brian O'Neill, really solid right tackle. So been a really strong state. And for a long time, he was the only bright spot on that offensive line. So continues to play good football. And then get over the defense end. Dude, if these guys stay healthy, Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter can be as good as any pass rush duo in football. Like right now, if you had to ask me, I would probably say Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa is the best 1-2. Then, Max Crosby's interesting, Chandler Jones paired with them. But man, if these guys play a full 17, these guys could put up some damage. They could each be 12-plus sack guys. And then there you add in a Harrison Phillips, who we'll talk about later on. You still have a Dalvin Tomlinson. Then in the linebacking core, Jordan Hicks comes over from Arizona. Eric Kendricks, if he's healthy. Wrong side of 30, but still one of the best and most instinctual linebackers in football. And he's just got a nose for the ball carrier and knows how to make big plays. Then you get to the secondary. That's where I do worry about this team. We'll talk about Cam Dantzler later on, but you're also talking about a very, aged Patrick Peterson and only getting older. Andrew Booth Jr., who's this guy I thought, and in a lot of my mocks, had him in the first round. Falls to the second, has some injuries. Good value, but, how do those injuries linger and some of the other concerns that, some other scouts might have had with his game, how does that translate to the NFL level? And then I feel pretty good about the safety position beyond that because, Harrison Smith is older at least, but he's still such a good player. And then Cameron Bynum going in, still a young player. I think it's year 2 for him. He had some moments last year. And then also with the 32nd overall pick, Lewis Seen, really nice ad. You trade down and, depending on your trade chart, maybe they didn't get the most value for it, but added a nice football player and allowed them to kind of let the board come to them. So I can understand that process, and I think Lewis Seen's a really nice player. So maybe it's Seen and Bynum moving forward, but while you still have Harrison Smith, and we live in an NFL where 3 safety sets and 3 safety rotations are becoming more and more prevalent. Literally a couple of years ago, you saw 2 teams playing in the Super Bowl, the Chiefs and the Bucs, who were doing it as good as anybody. And I think the Vikings can utilize and take advantage of something similar this year. Moving on, realistic goal and reach goal are what they sound like. So realistic goal, finish over 500, 8-9 last year, you're knocking on the door. That's simply put, just win one more football game. And I'll talk about the Cardinals game because that's a game to watch this year. A field goal away from taking down the Cardinals and preventing them from that undefeated start to the year, and flip that game, and Minnesota's over 500. So very realistic there. Reach goal, win the NFC North, and Kevin O'Connell wins Coach of the Year. Now, if you get one, you're probably not going to be upset about the other. Specifically, if you win the North, Coach of the Year, whatever. you're a 1 through 4 seed in the NFC. You're feeling pretty good about that if you're a Vikings fan. But if you got both, man, that's awesome. And what that would signal to me is if Kevin O'Connell wins Coach of the Year, 1, you probably won the North, and 2, you maximize Kirk Cousins' value, and you took him from this mid, tier 2, tier 3, depending on how you structure it, and it was just solid quarterback. But the question is, should you pay him? But with the right system and the right trust behind him, he becomes somebody that you can feel more confident giving that money to, and he can elevate your team, and he can be the quarterback that the Vikings originally signed him to be, right? So that's the ultimate, if everything can break right for the Vikings, of course they could win a Super Bowl, but winning the North, Kevin O'Connell maximizes Kirk Cousins' value, and then it feels like this team is maybe an off-season away, plugging away where they're getting a little old at some spots, and then this team can be legit contenders, and another year of Is Aaron Rodgers coming back in Green Bay? What does that wide receiver room look like, et cetera, et cetera? So it could be an interesting picture that it paints for the future of the division as well. So then moving on to X Factors, these are not superstars. These are guys I truly think that if they take a step forward, hit the high side of variance, however you want to describe it, if they exceed your expectations, the team will do the same. And if they fall short, they have a sizable role, but they're disappointing this year, then the Vikings will also disappoint. So it's pretty intuitive, but look, Justin Jefferson's a freak. We should expect him to be good. And, like I said, Harrison Smith's still playing good football. We should expect that. Eric Kendricks, if he's healthy, he's a good linebacker. We should expect that. So these are true players that I think could go one way or the other. So, and they all have, sizable roles in front of them. Opportunity is what it's all about. So Christian Darrisaw, going to be starting this year at left tackle. Wasn't the initial starter, but then had some good, good moments last year, especially down the stretch. And he was this guy that, you have to be careful comparing him to Trent Williams, especially considering the year Trent Williams had last year. But that being said, felt like Trent Williams light coming out of Virginia Tech. Mean run blocker. Gonna have to work on this pass protection, but he's a solid athlete, so you feel confident that he's a multiple ball of clay and you can get him there. That's basically what I saw last year. So, scouting report, check, and now I'm just hoping to see that progression move forward. If it does, again, we've been talking about this offensive line for so long in Minnesota that needs to get better. You got to put investments there. If Darrisaw hits, you're talking about a guy that they traded down big time and still accumulated more draft capital in that draft. That was back in 2021. And ultimately still got a starting bookend left tackle, which, we know how valuable those are. And then Harrison Phillips, they signed him coming over from Buffalo. And it was just one of these teams where you may look at the roster last year for the Minnesota Vikings, and specifically Dalvin Tomlinson was a sizable addition, not only, with, his stature, but also just like the money investment. But then they also had some, pieces that were still in the mix there in the middle. But looking at Dalvin Tomlinson, 68.1 run defense grade, counter that. Harrison Phillips, nearly touching 80. So using Pro Football Focus numbers there, of course. But you're just talking about somebody that can try to keep Eric Kendricks and Jordan Hicks clean. That was an area where the Vikings really struggled. One of the worst, when it comes to, yards per carry, at bottom 5 in the NFL last year. They've got to get better there, and I think Harrison Phillips can be a guy to help improve that number. Pretty sure the number was 5 yards a carry, which is just unbelievable. So Harrison Phillips, he's got a big opportunity and a big chance to, plug up and improve the middle of that defense. And, Vikings take away the run. I'm still concerned about that secondary, which is going to lead me into Cam Dantzler, but shoring up one of the two weaknesses on that defense. And then Cam Dantzler, this guy who's had moments, seen flashes, but it felt like he was always in the doghouse with Mike Zimmer. So with the new regime, what does that mean for him? So, but also the opportunities there, right? Like Patrick Peterson getting older, losing some steps, and you're talking about a second round rookie cornerback. You don't know how much you want to leave them out on the field, especially if they struggle. Maybe it's best, we'll ease you into this one, we'll coach you up, and then maybe year 2, you'll get a bigger, role ahead of you. But man, Cam Dantzler is going to be a really interesting player, and I just don't know what to expect. And that's why he's such an interesting X factor, is because I don't know where to set my expectations. Is he a starting outside corner? Is he going to be in the nickel? I mean, truly don't know. So Cam Dantzler is going to be a fun player to watch. And if we see more of what we saw in his rookie year, where, small sample size, but was the highest graded rookie cornerback from Pro Football Focus, if they get that type of guy, gives them somebody, maybe that's not a full CB1, but at least can be solid enough, manage against wide receiver ones, right? Because Pat Pete just ain't that guy anymore. If Cam Dantzler can step into at least that type of role, it improves that secondary and how I look at it a lot. Now, if he takes an even bigger step forward and becomes CB1, and then we're talking about a different secondary here. So I'm excited to see, but again, I just don't know where to put my expectations at right now for Dantzler. So moving on to some games to watch. I don't include division games just because, every time the Vikings play the Packers, if you're a Vikings fan or just a fan of the NFC or whatever the case may be, that's a big game. That has a lot of implications for the NFC North. So don't include division games. But week 2 at the Philadelphia Eagles, two teams that could certainly be battling for a wild card spot. I think the Eagles win the NFC East, but still wild card battle for sure. It's also Monday Night Football, and Kirk Cousins has that monkey on his back of not being able to perform in primetime games. What if he goes out and he balls out against a really solid defense in Philadelphia? That's going to be, the kickstart for the Kevin O'Connell Coach of the Year campaign. It's going to be the kickstart for, hey, Kirk Cousins, he's clutch. He can perform in big-time games. You just need to get away from Mike Zimmer and the Kubiaks and et cetera, et cetera. It's going to change the rhetoric and the outlook for this team so much. Now, granted, it's going to be week 2. Can that be sustained all the way to the end of the year? But when we're talking about, power rankings and getting set for the lines coming out for week 3, that game with the Vikings ball out and Kirk Cousins specific balls out will change the outlook and the rhetoric around them exponentially. Then fast forward to week 8. Again, it was a close game early on last year. The Vikings nearly took down the Cardinals, missed field goal away, which, if you're a Vikings fan, how many times have you heard of that? But nearly prevented the Cardinals from going on to that great undefeated. They were the last undefeated team in the NFL. The Vikings almost prevented that. But also, again, two teams that could be battling for wild card implications, but also two teams with a lot of offense. And I have questions about both teams' secondary, the middle of their defense. So they have similar weaknesses while also having similar strengths. Also, by week 8, you have Nuke Hopkins back on the field. So Justin Jefferson on one side, DeAndre Hopkins, Kirk Cousins, Kyler Murray. There's just star power left, right, and center in that game. So, of course, it's a game to watch. And then ahead, AFC opponent here, week 15 against the Indianapolis Colts. This is kind of Harrison Phillips. This is a game against a power run scheme, and Jordan Taylor, maybe the best pure runner in the NFL. How does that Vikings run defense hold up? Are they giving up 5+ yards a carry? Because if so, they're probably not going to win this game. And also, off of that, you have such an instinctual player like Harrison Smith and Eric Kendricks. When you have such a good running game like Indianapolis does, how does play action play off of that? But I think the Vikings with a Phillips, a Kendricks, and even a Lewis Cine, I think could be a rookie that you see the football IQ right away with. I think the Vikings might hold their own there in that respect. And then on the other side, Gus Bradley. I'm interested to see how this cover 3 system is implemented, transitioning from the cover 2 heavy Matt Eberflus style of defense. Stephon Gilmore's there, but I think the rest of the secondary can be a little iffy. Kenny Moore is great, but he's a nickel corner, so how much of an impact does he have slowing down Justin Jefferson? Basically, my question here. This could totally be a game, and it's at home, so the Colts play in the dome too. But this could be offensive firepower, but in different ways, where I think the Vikings can take the Colts apart through the air. I think the Colts might be able to return the favor just through the run game. So interested to see how the weaknesses of these two teams match up with one another and whose weakness isn't as glaring, basically. Who sucks less with their areas of problems, which you're not going to have a perfect roster. Neither one of these teams are perfect teams. So that's going to be a fun one. Plus, late in the year, I always like, gauging how good were you, let's say week 2 against the Eagles versus week 15 of the Colts. Did you have an absolute collapse down the stretch, or did you actually get better? Those are all things that I like to keep an eye on and keep track of as the year goes on, especially for my games to watch segment. But that's going to do it for my Minnesota Vikings season preview. Again, thank you everybody for 1,000 subscribers. I cannot say thank you enough. But let me hear what you have to say about the Vikings down below in the comments section. How many wins do you think they come away with? Who are some X factors? And what are some games you're looking forward to watching Minnesota play this year? Love to have your thoughts. And I respond to just about every comment. So let's talk about the Vikings down below. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It really would help me out a ton. And if you're new around here, want to help us continue to climb, just hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.